Hello everyone, this is Dr. Madhulika Gupta. I am Associate Professor at Dr. D.Y. Patil Center for Management Research, Chikhli, Pune. And I'll be teaching you business economics in your third semester, right? So before we begin, I would like to introduce you to the syllabus, to your syllabus. So let me share a screen with you all of your syllabus so that you get acquainted with your syllabus before we start, right? So this is your syllabus of business economics. In this particular semester, you'll be studying macro, right? I think in the first and second semester, you have studied micro as a business economics part. So here you'll be studying macro part, right? So what the syllabus is, let's understand. So your first unit comprises of the concepts like introduction to macroeconomics, definition of macroeconomics, nature, scope, significance, limitations of macroeconomics, right? And concepts like national income and meaning and importance of national income like GNP, NNP, GDP, per capita income, personal income, disposable income. You'll be studying all these concepts in your second unit. In your third unit, we'll study about theories of output and employment, like the classical theory of employment, Keynes' criticism on classical theory of employment, Keynesian theory of employment, like consumption and saving functions. So these we'll study. Like in fourth unit, we'll be studying saving functions, types of investments, etc. Right? So this is your syllabus of your third semester for your business economics. So let's now proceed with your presentation. So I'll be sharing the PPT with you all. So let's begin with your syllabus. Like first unit, it is introduction to macroeconomics. Now, what is the definition of macroeconomics? So macroeconomics is a branch of economics that studies the behavior and performance of an economy as a whole. So it focuses on the aggregate change in the economy, such as unemployment, growth rate, gross domestic product, and inflation, right? So macroeconomics is a branch of economics that studies how an overall economy, the market system that operate on a large scale behaves. So macroeconomics studies economy wide phenomena such as inflation, price levels, rate of economic growth, national income, gross domestic product, and changes in unemployment, right? So to understand it more thoroughly, like there are two sides of study of economics, like macro and micro. The micro you've already studied in last semesters. So as the term implies, macroeconomics looks at the overall big picture scenario of the economy, right? But to put simply, it focuses on the way the economy performs as a whole and then analyzes how different sectors of the economy relate to one another and to understand how the aggregate functions. So this includes looking at the variables like unemployment, GDP, inflation, etc., etc. So macroeconomists develop models explaining the relationship between these factors. Such economic models and the forecasts they produce are used by government entities to aid in the construction and evaluation of economic, monetary, and fiscal policies. So by businesses to set strategy in domestic and global markets, and by investors to predict and plan for movements in various assets classes. Some of the key questions addressed by macroeconomics include what causes unemployment, what causes inflation, what creates or stimulates economic growth. So macroeconomics attempts to measure how well an economy is performing, to understand what forces drive it, and to project how performance can be improved. So it deals with the performance structure and behavior of the entire economy, like in contrast to microeconomics, which is more focused on the choices made by individual actors in the economy, like people, household, industries, right? So macro is a wide concept than micro. Let's understand the nature of macroeconomics, like is basically known as theory of income. So it is concerned with the problem of economic fluctuations, unemployment, inflation or deflation, and economic growth, of course. So It deals with the aggregates and of all quantities, not with individual price levels or outputs, but with national output altogether, right? So it is a study of national aggregates and economic growth. So the very first nature of macroeconomics is studies the aggregates. Like scope of macroeconomics, as I told you, is very wide. It's wider than micro. So microeconomics concern is study of aggregates, and it is concerned with the concepts such as aggregate demand, aggregate supply, total output, general price level, national income, etc. The second one is general equilibrium analysis, like it is concerned with the behavior of aggregates and their interdependence on each other. So it is a general equilibrium analysis in which everything depends on everything else. For instance, a change in the income level may result in change in savings, which may turn or influence investments, right? So everything is interconnected. Useful for government policies. Another study of macroeconomics is highly useful for the formulation and implementation of economic policies of the government. So the government is concerned like with the regulation of aggregates of the economic system, such as general price level, the general level of production, the level of employment, and of course so on, right? The next is income theory. Like the income theory is the major aspect of my macroeconomic theory. A major task of macroeconomics like is the determination of national income. So it studies the factors determining national income and the causes of the trends in national income, right? The last is overall view of the economy. Now the study of macroeconomics gives an overall view of the economy, right? It interlinks like various aggregates so as to show the interrelationship between them. It tends to provide a more realistic view of the overall economy. So this all covers the nature of macroeconomics. Now the next is scope, the scope of macroeconomics, right? Now, macroeconomics is a vital field of study for economists, like I told you, for government, for financial bodies, and of course also for researchers to analyze the general national issues and of course economic well-being of the country. So macroeconomics widely covers two major fundamentals, which are further subparted into multiple topics such as explained below, right? So it is macroeconomic theories and macroeconomic policies. These both form the scope of macroeconomics. So government, as we know, is a regulatory body of a nation, and it considers various aspects which are crucial and impacts the lives of the citizens. So there are 6 significant theories under macroeconomics. Let's understand them one by one. So the first theory is economic growth and development. So the status of a country's economy can be evaluated in the terms of per capita real income as studied under macroeconomics. The next is theory of national income, which covers the various topics related to the evaluation of national income, including income, expenditure, budgeting, etc., etc. The next theory is theory of money. Now, macroeconomics analyzes the functions of the Reserve Bank in the economy, right? The inflow and outflow of money, along with its impact on the employment level, of course. So these all forms the scope of macroeconomics. The next theory is theory of international trade. Now, it is the field of study that enlightens upon the exports and imports of goods or services. So in brief, it determines the impact of cross-border trade and duty charged on the economy, right? The next theory is theory of employment. Now, this stream of macroeconomic helps to figure out the level of unemployment prevailing employment conditions in the country and to know how it affects the supply, demand, now savings, consumptions, and expenditure behavior in the economy, right? The last theory is theory of general price level. The most important of all is the analysis of product pricing, right? And how these price levels fluctuate because of inflation or deflation. This is what is studied in this. So this is about the first part of the scope of macroeconomics, that is macroeconomics theories. Now, second part of scope is macroeconomic policies. Now, The government and Reserve Bank functions together, right, determining the macroeconomic policies for the nation's welfare and development, of course. The two segments of this section are fiscal policy and monetary policy. Now, the fiscal policy, as we know, is a means of meeting the deficit of income over the expenditure. It is a form of budgetary decision under macroeconomics. And on the other hand, monetary policy is framed by the Reserve Bank in collaboration with the government. These policies are the measures taken to maintain economic stability and growth in the country by regulating various interest rates, right? So this forms the scope of macroeconomics, right? Now let's understand the significance of macroeconomics one by one, that is important. So the very first one is trade cycle analysis. Now it is beneficial for timing the economic fluctuation, right? Why? To avoid or to be prepared for any financial crisis or adverse situation. So it's very important significance. So next is economic policies formulation. Like, as you all know, that framing of the monetary and fiscal policies majorly depends upon the study of prevailing macroeconomic conditions in the country. So it's very important for the country to understand the economic policies. The next importance significance is downsizes the effects of inflation and deflation. How? Now, you know, microeconomics also helps the government and the financial bodies to prepare for the situation of economic instability. So this is how they can prepare for the situation in future and take precautionary actions, precautionary measures. The next is facilitates material welfare. Now, this stream of economics gives a broader perspective of social or national issues. Now, therefore, the ones who look forward to contribute to the welfare of society needs to study macroeconomics. The next is it regulates economic system. Now, the analysis of like it ensures to keep or check over the proper functioning of the country's economy in actual position. Like it resolves economic issues, like the analysis of macroeconomics theories and issues help the economists and the government to figure out the causes and possible solutions of such macro level problems. And the last is, of course, economic development. Now, we all know that dealing with different economic conditions by making use of macroeconomic research opens up the way towards the country's growth, because we can find out in advance if something worse is going to come up in the country, and then precautionary actions can be taken and follow-up can be taken, and therefore economic growth is of course connected to the country's growth and overall development, right? So this is the significance of macroeconomics. The next we'll understand the limitations of macroeconomics. The very first one, it considers aggregates as homogeneous, right? The individual data may not be similar in structure or composition. Thus, when such single figure are compiled to get an aggregate value, so it may not seem to be that useful, because everything is not homogeneous. Everything is different to each other. So it takes that into consideration, and that is the drawback. It can be misleading and difficult aggregation. Like the extensive application of the macroeconomics measures seem to be irrelevant when aimed at 100% result. So that's the another drawback. The next is fallacy of deductive inferences, like macroeconomic functions and aggregates values we understood. But the interpretation of the individual activities may not be the same as compared to the conclusion drawn on the mass level. So that can be a big limitation. The next is conceptual and statistical complexities. Like when the individual data have different units, the aggregation becomes arduous and holds on no significance, right? Unnecessary aggregate variables, like when the individual elements need to be examined separately, the aggregate values cannot be used for the purpose. Understand? It neglects individual consumers. Of course, the concept of macroeconomics overlooks the importance of the individual unit, because it studies overall economy as an overall. It doesn't study a single consumer, since the fundamental is to make use of the aggregates. So that is the biggest drawback. And too much generalization. Now, the conclusion derived from the aggregation of the data is generally taken to be true for all the individuals, but that cannot happen because as we study that human beings are a social animal and everybody has different wants, different desires, different decision making. So it can't be applied to everyone, right? So that is the biggest limitation and drawback. Now, objectives like macroeconomic objectives. What are the objectives? So broadly, the objective of macroeconomic policies is to maximize, of course, the level of national income, providing economic growth. Why? To raise the utility and standard of living of the participants in the economy, the people of the country, of course. So there are a number of secondary objectives which are held to lead the maximization of income over the long run. So while there are variations between the objectives of different national and international entities, like most of the common are like given here in slide. Like the very first one is sustainability. What is that? A rate of growth which allows an increase in living standards without undue structural and environmental difficulties. Like economic growth will be studied, like it will be studied in a future slides. So sustainability is the objective of macroeconomics, to provide sustainability to the people living in the country, sustainability in the standard of living of the people of the country, understand? Full employment is the next objective, that where those who are able and willing to have a job can get one. That is given that there will be certain amount of frictional, seasonal and structural employment. Of course, it's a part and parcel, but the objective is to give a full employment on a regular basis to the citizens of the country is the major objective of macroeconomics. The next is price stability. Now, when prices remain largely stable, and there is not rapid inflation or deflation, price stability is not necessarily the same as zero inflation, but instead a steady level of low moderate inflation is often regarded as ideal. So it is worth noting that prices of some goods and services often fall as a result of productivity improvements during periods of inflation. So as inflation is the only measure of general price levels. However, inflation is a good measure of price stability. Zero inflation is often undesirable in an economy. Understand? So these are all are the objectives, like to maintain a price stability in the economy. Next is external balance. Now, equilibrium in the balance of payments. When we say about external balance, we're talking about exports. So equilibrium in the balance of payments without the use of artificial constraints. That is the value of exports being roughly equal to the value of imports over the long run, right? The next is equitable distribution of income and wealth, like a fair share of the national cake, more equitable than would be in the case of an entirely free market, right? So like the other economic objectives, the distribution of income is partly subjective or normative issues. So everybody should have, there should be an equitable distribution of income and wealth in the country. That is another objective of macroeconomics. The next one is increasing productivity. Now, more output per unit of labor per hour is increasing your productivity, of course. So also, since labor is but one of the many inputs to produce goods and services, it could also be described as output per unit of factor inputs per hour. So your productivity has to be increased, because if productivity is increased, that means you are producing goods at the least possible combination, cost combination, and then able to provide it to the customers at the least cost, and it's all connected, right? Interlinked. And the last is thermal equilibrium. Now, what is that? Equilibrium in the balance of payments is the thermal equilibrium. That is, keep a balance between your imports and exports so that the money flow is equal in the economy. It's not only like we are importing and the money is going out of the economy. It's all be exporting so that money is coming in the economy as well. So that is very important. So to conclude, macroeconomics is the basis of various economic reforms and the national decision model in the country, right? So, however, the policies framed under this concept usually have a dual impact. That is on the society as a whole and individual citizens, right? On the other hand, and therefore it requires a highly analytical, logical, and extraordinary approach, right? Reaching to such interferences. So that's all about the your first unit. I've covered almost all the topics of your first unit, and in the next video coming in, I'll be explaining you the another unit, another concepts. So you watch this video carefully. If you have any questions, you can put in the message. I'll try to answer them. Or we can also have a lecture, very interactive lecture, wherein I can solve all your difficulties. So we'll have more such videos in future. So keep watching carefully and prepare notes, right? And study thoroughly. Thank you. See you in another video. Thank you so much.